Well, congrats to you tonight. I just want to note that once again, Donald Trump cost my party Senate seats. I was advising these same Georgia runoffs in 2020 when he lost those seats by, touting the election lies when it was Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. Once again, he put his hand on the scale and put up a candidate who was highly unqualified, Herschel Walker, to be in the U.S. Senate. And so now we're in a position where we have to come around and realize we are losing under him. The fact that in Biden's economy, how poorly the country is doing, the fact that by and large voters, right, left, or center, say we're on the wrong trajectory, yet they're not voting for change. That since 1934, that they have not actually had a part incumbent not lose seats in the Senate. That is an indictment of the Republican Party. We need to wake up because we are losing the moment.
Can I just say something about voters here in this whole midterm election? We saw a lot of split tickets.
Yeah.
People were voting for candidates. They were not just voting up and down the line. They were taking a look at a candidate's character and experience and saying, I want this person, I'm going to vote for the Republican governor in New Hampshire.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a development in this country. There are a couple of states that are famous for it, Montana being one of them, but it doesn't happen all the time in this country. And now, I think this is a great development. People are paying attention because the stakes are so high.
Can I say something? We keep talking about candidate quality.
Yeah.
And we only talk about it on the Republican side, saying they have negative candidate quality. But I just want to say, Reverend Warnock is an extraordinary human being. He's recognizable in our community as somebody who was working hard for people when he wasn't famous, working hard for people when his name wasn't in lights, believing in these causes when they were not popular. And so he's somebody who, there's a resonance that he has with people. People believe him. And I don't want it to only be, you had a bad guy on the Republican side. You had a good man on the Democratic side, and that's important.
And he didn't change.
He didn't change.
He could have dragged Herschel Walker through the end zone.
Through the
whatever.
What do you call it?
But he could have dragged him. There was so much material, but he was a man of character.
That part.
And said, I know who I am, and I'm going to run the race today. Now, I did.
I'm a little negative ad.
They did run their fair share of negative ads. I mean, 50, 60, $70 million in character smashing ads. So it wasn't a clean campaign.
It could have been a lot worse.
They did what they had to do. But I think on Van's point, one thing I learned about this entire election, people with personal brands, apart from somebody else, did well in both parties. Warnock had a brand apart from politics. But the Kemps and the DeWines and the DeSantises and the Abbotts and the Republican Party, they didn't depend on Donald Trump or some other person to define who they are. And I do think this ticket splitting, Gloria, there's something about being able to define and own who you are that people are responding to.
Right.
They don't want you to be a wholly owned subsidiary of some other person or thing. They just want you to be who you are. And Warnock, I think, got that right in this race. Walker got tagged with Trump, and the candidates in these Senate races that got tagged that way with Trump all across the board lost. And that's a big lesson for the next cycle.
Every Republican in this country ought to hold Donald Trump accountable for this. And I think the part that bothers me the most, and I've spent a lot of time trying to dissect this, is that Donald Trump, it's not out of ignorance or miscalculation. It's out of selfishness. He's not picking these candidates because he thinks it's good for the country or the party. He gave up caring about this country when he lied about the election. He cares about himself, and these candidates that he's picking are pawns. And he's playing a serious game, and he's costing us an economy. As a Republican, I'm watching a crumbling economy. I'm watching a foreign policy. I'm watching a border. These are things I care about for my future and my kids' future. That's why we're all in this game. And we need to hold Donald Trump accountable, and I hope sooner than later he's in the rearview mirror. We need to use this as a pivot point for us to move forward with a GOP 2.0, or call it what you want. We need a new direction that allows us to capitalize on the shortcomings.
And very well said, and I think that I just want to issue the word of caution that we have seen Donald Trump come back from the ashes many times. He did poorly in these midterms, the insurrection, he comes back and is the leader of the party. It needs to be a wake-up moment. The way that you believe in Raphael Warnock, I want candidates on the Republican side that I believe in that way, and that is just not who we put up in some of these races. So it's time to have that moment of, are we going to keep losing with Donald Trump, or are we going to move on?
The Trump strategy was that the waters would part for him after the midterm elections. And of course, just the opposite has happened.
Yeah.
Not to mention his legal problems, not to mention throwing aside the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. If Republicans don't have the guts to separate, if not divorce, at this point, I mean Republicans in leadership roles, not rank and file, I mean people leading, then there's a problem. There's a good group of candidates out there, as you were talking about, Scott. The question is where the followers are going to be, and I think followers want to win. If they believe in what the Republican Party stands for, they want to win.
Party leaders, by the way, we've done this historically. Republican party leaders need to come together and decide how much do we want to lose, or are we willing to band together? And by the way, not run 15 or 20 people in 2024. Put our money and our efforts behind a couple of people who can actually beat him.
But you're going to have to be honest with the voters. And you're going to have to say that Donald Trump lied to them. And that means that at times you lied to them too. And I don't know if many Republicans and leaders are going to actually want to do that.
Well, on the Democrats, we should just let that just hang. Just hang. That was a mic drop.
There's a difference between want to and need to, right? People might not want to say that they made a mistake and they followed down a rabbit trail about an election fraud and conspiracy theories and all their different nuances in their states, but we need to. Yeah. To heal and rebuild this party, we need to move past Donald Trump and call it for what it is. It was a mistake, and we need to move on.
But many of the prominent Republicans in the Senate who once opposed Donald Trump, sold their souls in order to curry favor.
And so,
how do they bounce back from that?
We've been talking about redemption and grace, and I believe in all of that, but this is still politics, right? And so people,
what does that have to do with redemption and grace?
I
want to talk about our party then.
I just don't think people are, the seas haven't parted, but they haven't also drowned Donald Trump. And it's because folks are not sure on where they want to fall. Mm-hmm. And the truth telling that is going to have to happen around why Donald Trump was able to get these type of candidates to win in primaries and why he was able to get a mob of people to come on January 6th requires some real honesty that I don't know exists in the Republican leadership. Maybe it does. I'm hopeful. For my country, I'm hopeful, but I haven't seen it yet.
I mean, he talked about terminating the Constitution a couple days ago, and there's still a lot of.
I've lived through all these undulations, and you're right. He has come back. I'm telling you, in the last month, something has changed.
Yep.
It does feel different.
Something has changed, and you've had a number of people in Washington, but you've got people out in the middle of the country saying, you know what? I'm glad he was there. I like what he did. I voted for the man. I knocked on doors, but I don't want to lose anymore, and I'm tired of carrying this guy's bags. And this has been one of the worst months of his political life. I'm telling you, something has changed, and that's what primaries are for. You're right. That's what primaries are for.